the sea. I am the wave of the ocean. I am a ray of the sun. I am the spear in the battle. Natara, Artri, Eirean.
Okay. Zerilath Eternal is in the house. What is good? Woo, I picked a long one for my intro. I really wanted to milk something that felt appropriate, and I can't get enough of the last Rotting Christ album, Pro Cristo. Oh, fucking shit. It's not like it's the heaviest fucking album in the universe, but it's beautifully fucking produced. Uh, like, this is probably my favorite way of hearing classical Greek or classic like Latin in choral. Just and it's the message behind the album that um it's it feels like a I'm not like the most versed in Rotting Christ's career or their lives, but it sounds like it is kind of like a they made a very fucking thematically pagan mature album, right? Because thematically, the albums that they are famous for, the album, they've been around for fucking forever, was in the messaging, right? It's just like it's like the exposure of the fraudness of of Christ, right? This was kind of like their bit, right? And it was very, and they're very good at it, right? And your band is looking for its originality. If your choice is to be a Satan worship band, your originality has to come from finding your personal expression of Satan, right? And so that's kind of the competition uh, in the underground metal scene for uh, like your concept for your band, the spirit the spirit of evil and badassness that it's all about, right? Um, and and I couldn't find enough people that were uh, pagan. Like it's like Europe, man. It's just like if I find a musician in Europe, I'm like, oh, good, you're a pagan, not just a guy who's like like a universal Satanist, where it's just like you're a pagan, but you're a pagan because you're a Satanist and you're free and you can do whatever the fuck you want, right? I love you people. I do. I do. I love you. You're some of my best friends. Um, I'm just I'm just like when it comes to what my fucking heart wants to do with music, and that's why I sit here without bandmates, without anybody who's fucking like diving, like, with New York so close to me. Like all the people I like, nobody's fucking like Like, where the fuck is Steve? I could use a goddamn guitarist, right? Like, I'm not the guy on anybody's fucking phone call list. And there's a reason for that, right? And, yeah. I'm glad I got to play bass for as long as I did in that time. But I had to bring bass playing to an end at a certain point. And then I finally got to guitar. And then after a year of dealing with pandemic and bullshit band dynamics, I rage quit my own band. But enough about me. We're here to talk about the Jews. Let's get on with the show. Anyway, we left off right at chapter 1. So, disclaimer, I do not know the full backstory of what is true or untrue in Josephus Flavius's words, but this is about the historical record of what his point of view of his accounts of things are. As this book has pointed out, he was a politician. So take this like with a grain of salt, like you would a presidential novel. Like, you're reading the Obama book, you're reading, you're reading Art of the Deal, you're reading these fucking things, right? Like, it's semi-autobiography that, and then Rome's corruption would have let this hold weight in certain circles. Herod's predecessors. At the time, when Antiochus Epiphanes was disputing the control of Palestine with Ptolemy VI, dissension broke out among the leading Jews, who competed for supremacy because no prominent person could bear to be subject to his equals. Onias, one of the chief priests, forced his way to the top and expelled from the city the sons of Tobias. They fled to Antiochus and implored him to use them as guides and invade Judea. This was just what the king wanted. So, setting out in person with a very large force, he stormed the city, killed a large number of Ptolemy's adherents, gave his men permission to loot as they liked, took the lead in plundering the sanctuary, and stopped the continuous succession of daily sacrifices for 3.5 years. The high priest Onias fled to Ptolemy, from whom he obtained a site in the district of Heliopolis. There he built a little town on the lines of Jerusalem and a sanctuary like the one he had left. All this will be referred to again in due course. Antiochus, I'm going to pronounce it in different ways until what settles comes to play when it's words with where you got to freaking flutter your freaking vocal cords for vowels that are in weird places that you don't normally speak in English. I've gotten pretty goddamn good at it with Old Norse though, and my German is catching up. Antiochus was far from satisfied with his unexpected capture of the city, the loot, and the long death roll. Unable to control his passions and remembering that the siege had cost him, he tried to force the Jews to break their ancient law by leaving their babies uncircumcised and sacrificing swine on the altar. What a saint! I like this guy. What a good man. You say that right out loud. Good. Keep your spearhead sheathed, sir. It is best for all of us, until time for war. Meeting with a blank refusal, he executed the leading recusants and Bacchides, who was sent by him to command the garrison, finding in these monstrous instructions scope for his savage instincts, plunged recklessly into every form of iniquity, torturing the most worthy citizens one by one and publicly displaying day after day the appearance of a captured city, till by the enormity of his crimes he drove his victims to attempt reprisals. All right, there we go. Awful. That is awful human behavior. Matthias, son of Asamoneus, a priest from the village of Modine, raised a tiny force consisting of 5 sons and himself, and killed Bacchides with cleavers. With cleavers? Gee, what? This is, that's some, like, Night of the Living Dead. What? What? How did you get to that fucking point? Let me go, hold on a second. If I read this right in this last passage, okay, so he tried to forge his, okay, along the death toll, unable to control his passions, remembering what the siege had cost him. Okay, blank refused to execute leading recusants. Monstrous scope for his savage was plunged recklessly. Iniquity and torturing was displaying day after day appearance of a captured, the appearance of a captured city. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So basically, he led a big revolt. And had the people pick a scapegoat and slaughter each other. Okay. All right, there you go. Okay, there's some horrible behavior, and now once again down here some horrible behavior with cleavers. Fearing the strength of the garrison, he fled to the hills for the time being, but when many of the common people joined him, he regained confidence, came down again, gave battle, defeated Antiochus's generals, and chased them out of Judea. By that success, he achieved supremacy, and in gratitude for his expulsion of the foreigners, his countrymen gladly accepted his rule, which on his decease he left to Judas, the eldest of his sons. He had a son named Judas. As Judas did not expect Antiochus to take this lying down, he not only marshaled the available Jewish forces, but took the bold step of allying himself with Rome. When Epiphanes again invaded the country, he counterattacked vigorously and drove him back. Then, striking while the iron was hot, he hurled himself against the garrison of the city, which had not been dislodged, threw the troops out of the upper city and shut them into the lower. The part of the town, into the lower. The part of the town called the Citadel. So it has lower in an uppercase, and I almost want to say that's how they translated it from a Greek word that means literally lower, and that was like the name of the location that they called the Citadel was the lower city, downtown versus uptown, right? So the Citadel downtown. Then, taking possessions of the temple, he cleaned the whole area and walled it round, ordered a new set of ceremonial vessels to be fashioned and brought into the sanctuary as the old ones were defiled, built another altar, and resumed the sacrifices. No sooner was Jerusalem once more the holy city than Antiochus died, leaving as heir both to his throne and to his hatred of the Jews his son Antiochus. The new king got together 50,000 foot, about 500 horse, and 80 elephants, and marched through Judea into the hill country. Now, remember that they told us that he didn't use the measurement of feet, right? So I'm going to guess that 50,000 is the number, and thus foot would have to be changed, and it's going to be 50,000 of whatever that actual word was. 50,000 cubits is probably the word, I think. All right. Beth Saron, a small town, fell into his hands, but at a place called Beth Zachariah, where the roads narrow, he was met by Judas and his army before the main bodies engaged. Eleazar, Judas's brother, noticed the tallest of the elephants fitted with a large howdah and gilded battlements, and assuming that Antiochus was on its back, ran out a long way ahead of his own line, and hacking away through the enemy's close array, got near to the okay. He had a Killdozer moment. This is like a Killdozer moment, right? You know, everybody knows Killdozer, the guy who fucking he got like a tank. He made a tank and he destroyed the IRS building. And he's one of our revolution. He's one of our modern revolutionary heroes. Hey, Saniko, you made it through. And Pasta Spliff, good to meet you. All right. Okay, hold on a second. I was down here. Large howdah battlements, I guess, was on the back, ran out a long way, had a long line, hacking way through the enemy's close array, got near to the elephant. To reach the supposed king was impossible because of his height from the ground, so he struck the beast's underbelly, bringing it down on himself so that he was crushed to death. So he fucked up, or he meant to, or was he like sacrificing himself? What? Or did Ganesha just do everybody a solid? Anyway, he had done no more than make a heroic attempt, putting glory before life itself. The rider of the elephant was in fact a commoner, even if he had happened to be Antiochus. Eleazar would have achieved nothing by his daring, but the reputation of having in the mere hope of a brilliant success gone to certain death. To his brother, the tragedy was a presage of the final issue. Determined and prolonged as was the Jews' resistance, superior numbers and fortune's favor gave the king's soldiers the victory. Most of his own men dead, Judas fled with the remnant of the toparchy of Gophna. Antiochus went on to Jerusalem, where he remained only a few days till lack of supplies compelled him to withdraw, leaving a garrison that he thought adequate and taking the rest of his forces to winter quarter in Syria. After the king's retreat, Judas did not let the grass grow under his feet. Large numbers of Jews flocked to his standard, and he had already rallied the survivors of the battle. So near the village of Esdasa, he challenged Antiochus' generals. In the battle that followed, he fought magnificently and inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy, but lost his own life. Only a few days later, his brother John fell victim to a plot of the pro-Syrian party. John was succeeded by another brother, Jonathan, who did everything possible to strengthen his authority in his own country, securing his position by his friendship with Rome and by making a truce with Antiochus' son. Unfortunately, none of these precautions could guarantee him security. Trypho, guardian of the young Antiochus and virtually regent, had long been plotting against the boy and endeavoring to eliminate his friends. And when Jonathan came with a very small escort to Ptolemais to see Antiochus, he treacherously seized and imprisoned him and launched a campaign against the Jews. Then, repulsed by Simon, Jonathan's brother, he avenged his defeat by murdering Jonathan. Simon's conduct of affairs was most efficient. He reduced Gazara, Joppa, and Jania in the neighborhood of Jerusalem and demolished the citadel after overwhelming the garrison. Later he allied himself with Antiochus against Trypho, whom Antiochus was besieging in Dora before marching against the Parthians. But he did not cause the king to modify his ambitions by helping him to destroy Trypho. It was not long before Antiochus sent an army under his general Cendebeus to ravage Judea and reduce Simon to subjection. Simon, in spite of his years, showed a young man's vigor in his conduct of the campaign. He sent his sons ahead with his stoutest men, while he himself, at the head of a section of his army, took the offensive in another direction. He also placed large numbers of men in ambush all over the hill country, and was successful in every onset. So brilliant was his victory that he was appointed high priest, and after 170 years of Macedonian control, gave the Jews their freedom. Let's read the annotation. A number of errors in the foregoing paragraphs. Josephus later corrected in his Antiquities. Several statements cannot be reconciled with First Maccabees. Excuse me. He too was the victim of a plot. He was assassinated at a banquet by Ptolemy, his son-in-law, who, after locking up Simon's wife and two of his sons, sent a party to murder the third son, John Hyrcanus. Warned of their approach, the youngsters made a dash for the city, having great confidence in the people, who remembered what his father had achieved and were disgusted with Ptolemy's iniquitous conduct. Ptolemy hurled himself against another gate, but was thrown back by the citizens, who had already welcomed Hyrcanus with open arms. Ptolemy at once retired to one of the forts above Jericho called Dagon. And Dagon, of course, is the fish god, who is also in H.P. Lovecraft, as you all know, and is also where the Pope's outfit comes from, as the big hat is the fish head. Hyrcanus, invested with the high priesthood, like his father before him, offered sacrifice to God, and then hurried after Ptolemy to rescue his mother and brothers. His attack on the fort started promisingly enough, but he held up by, and I wonder what word for God he used. I mean, and did they translate it properly? Right? Because like, I guarantee you, publishers like this, they're gonna freaking, they may have an agenda for that. That's one of the things you got to look out for, because they may want to keep things uniform with translations and transliterations of the Bible as ordered from the publishers of the Bible. His attack on the fort started promisingly enough, but he held up by his natural feelings. Every time Ptolemy was in a difficulty, he brought out John's mother and brothers on to the ramparts where they could be seen by all and began to torture them, threatening to throw them headlong unless John broke off the siege forthwith. This atrocity filled Hyrcanus with anger, and still, I like his name, Hyrcanus, which also, it almost sounds like Harkonnen. which also is a really cool word to say. And I'm excited. I got the first three books in the Dune series in a trilogy box. So I'm really excited to read that. That's going to be private reading. That's going to be for my personal enjoyment while listening to amazing things on my record player. Anyway, and still more with pity and fear. But neither torture nor the threat of death could make his mother flinch. She stretched out her arms and implored her son on no account to let her cruel sufferings induce him to spare the vile creature. Better death at Ptolemy's hands than life without end, so long as he paid for his wrongs to their house. Whenever John, thrilled by his mother's fortitude, listened to her entreaties, he launched a fresh attack. But when he saw her flesh torn with the lash, his resolution weakened and his feelings overcame him. This dragged out the siege till the year of rest came around. For like the seventh day, the seventh year is observed by the Jews as a time of rest. This freed Ptolemy from the siege, and after putting John's mother and brothers to death, he fled to Xenocochilus, the autocrat of Philadelphia. Antiochus, eager to avenge his defeat at Simon's hands, marched into Judea and pitched his camp before Jerusalem besieged Hyrcanus. Hyrcanus opened the tomb of David, the wealthiest of kings, and removed more than 3,000 talents. With a tenth of this sum, he bribed Antiochus to raise the siege. With the balance, he did what no Jew ever done before. He maintained a body of mercenaries. I love the way he phrased it. He's just like, this is a Jew telling a Jewish story. He's just like, and he did something no Jew did before. He held mercenaries together. Like, that's never been done before. What? Really? That? That's ridiculous to me. That sounds absurd. It's just like it's just kind of part of that we Jews we're so pathetic, right? It's such a we're so pathetic kind of way of saying it. It's his words, not mine. Anyway, well, congratulations, sir. You maintained your mercenaries. Good for you. When later Antiochus marched against the Parthians, giving him a chance to retaliate, he at once launched a campaign against the towns of northern Palestine. Correctly assuming that he would find no first-class troops in them, Madab and Gamea, with the towns nearby, submitted, as did Sichem and Gerizim. He was successful also against the Kuthians and the people living round the copy of the temple at Jerusalem. And Idumea, a number of towns, submitted, including Dorian and Marissa. Advancing to Samaria, where now stands Sebaste, the city built by King Herod, he constructed a wall right around and entrusted the siege to his sons Aristobulus and Antigonus. They pressed it relentlessly, bringing the inhabitants so near to starvation that they resorted to the most unwanted food. They appealed for aid to Antiochus and Aspendian. He readily agreed, but was defeated by Aristobulus and his men, chased by the brothers all the way to Scythopolis. He managed to escape. All right, Scythopolis, that's got to be a Scythian city. If that's not a Scythian city, then I'd be shocked. Nobody puts Scyth in the classical world, the Skith, in there unless it's some Scythian thing. Like, usually not. Is there a Scyth anywhere else that isn't the Scythians in language in the Middle East? Hey, what's up, Tim Timony? Anyway. So Scythopolis, he managed to escape. They, returning to Samaria, again shut the people inside the walls. Then they took the city, demolished it, and enslaved the inhabitants as success following success. They lost none of their ardor, but marching their forces as far as Scythopolis, overran the region and ravaged all the country inland from Mount Carmel. Okay. Let me see here. I'm going to read the rest of this page. And then after I've read the rest of this page, I am going to take a mid-break. So hopefully I can find I gotta find some music for that. I don't want to play more off the Rotting Christ. I just wanted to do the intro with the Rotting Christ today. I wasn't gonna do album thematic in any particular manner. Okay. Jealousy of the continued success of John and his sons aroused the bitter hostility of their fellow countrymen, who gathered in large numbers and engaged in active opposition, which, at last, flared up in open war and ended in defeat. For the rest of his natural life, John enjoyed prosperity, and after no less than 30 years of admirable administration, he died, leaving 5 sons, blessed if ever a man was, and with no cause to blame fortune as far as he was concerned. He alone enjoyed the 3 greatest privileges at once: political power, the high priesthood, and the prophetic gift. So constant was his divine inspiration that no future event was hidden from him. For instance, he foresaw and foretold that his 2 eldest sons would not retain control of the state. Their overthrow is a story worth telling. So far they fell below their predecessors' prosperity. When their father died, the eldest of them, Aristobulus, turned the constitution into a monarchy and was the first to wear a crown for 471 years and 3 months. As usual, Josephus' figure is too large, this time by 40 years. Okay, and was the first to wear a crown. I'm going to imagine that it meant to say in 471 years and 3 months, meaning that it wasn't a monarchy for 500 years almost, right? After the return of the nation to their own land, set free from slavery in Babylon, to the next brother, Antigonus, of whom he seemed very fond, he assigned equal honors. The rest he imprisoned in fetters. In fetters, too, he placed his mother, who contested his claim to supremacy, as John had left her in supreme charge, going so far in brutality as to let her die of starvation in the dungeon. Wow, what a bitterness over all these things. Like, I'm trying to piece this together with my understanding of the rabbi system in the Bach saga, right? This is part of why I'm doing this now, right? Because now that I have my head reasonably wrapped around that layer of the puzzle, it's that the rabbis are these guys that are above these people. Like these people are all playing a theocratic Game of Thrones over matters not mentioned in this book directly. Right? Because these guys are kind of these are these family circles for these rabbis that then go off and make the half-breeds that maintain the royal families that run the world. Right? And that's how the Bach Saga talks about these things. Right? And so that's what's going on between these people here and Rome, and that's what's been going on with these people here in the United States. Because this is the business of those guys. These are the poor souls that are all caught up in it, right? Like these major names, like think of the caste system, Jarls, Carls, and Thralls, right? You're watching the Jarls that are still puppets to the rabbis, right? These are slaves with power. But there's the hidden authority that is held by the spirit that is maintained by the rabbis in those temples. Anyway. So when we get back, I'm going to read the next couple of lines over there on the bottom. Let me see. Move this over and need to blow this up a little bit. What do I want to play? What do I want to play for you? Yeah. Hopefully they don't pick on this stream too much with the copyright, because I do have my fair use up, but Rotting Christ is kind of a hot ticket right now, and so is Opeth, and I'm in the mood to play something from the new Opeth, is what I'm in the mood for. So, Last Will and Testament. Is this it? That's it.
Welcome to the...
No ads. Go away, ad. There we are. Let's see. What do I want to play? I want to play chapter... Let's play chapter 4. Let's play chapter 4. Hey, there we are. We're back. That was chapter 4 from The Last Will and Testament. Which I'm hoping isn't like Opeth's like last album. Like, wouldn't it be hysterical if the band like retires, or they retire from making like this is like like Emperor, right? Like, what if Opeth turns into Emperor, and they never make another fucking album again? They all go off and do other things, and then once a year they do an Opeth tour. I mean, that'd be fine. They got so much fucking material with all the songs that are fucking 7 to 20 minutes. Anyway, welcome back. We're going to barrel through. Let's see. Let's turn the screen back on so y'all can read along. Vengeance overtook him in the loss of his brother Antigonus, or Antigonus. I don't know if they want me to say it like a J or like a G, right? Antigonus? It's Antigenes. No, it would not be an E's. It would be definitely an us. Anyway, Antigonus, of whom he was so fond that he had made him share of his royal authority. He killed even him as a result of slanders invented by unscrupulous courtiers. At first their tales were disbelieved by Aristobulus, who, as we have said, was very fond of his brother and put down most of their lies to jealousy. But when Antigonus returned with full ceremony from a campaign to attend the feast at which it is an old custom to put up tabernacles to God, it happened that Aristobulus was ill at the time. At the end of the feast, Antigonus went up to the temple with his bodyguard and in full regalia to offer prayers, mainly for his brother's recovery. Meanwhile, the unscrupulous courtiers went to the king and told him all about the escort of soldiers and the proud bearing of Antigonus, improper in a subject. He was coming, they said, with a huge force to murder him, unable to rest content with the shadow of royalty when he could grasp the substance. These tales by degrees overcame the reluctance of Aristobulus, who took care to hide his suspicions, but at the same time to guard against any unseen danger, while he himself was confined to bed in the fort at first called Beris and later Antonia. He stationed his bodyguard in one of the underground passages, with orders to leave Antigonus alone if unarmed, but to kill him if he came in arms. Then he sent men to warn his brother to come unarmed. To come unarmed. To counter this, the queen contrived a very cunning plot with the conspirators. They bribed the messengers to suppress the king's warning and tell Antigonus that his brother had heard he had secured some wonderful armor and military equipment in Galilee. Owing to his unfortunate illness, he could not come and see them himself. However, he went on, "Now that you are just leaving, I should very much like to see you in your outfit." Hearing this, and aware of nothing in his brother's disposition to make him suspect any harm, Antigonus set off in his armor to have it inspected. When he came to the dark passage called Strato's Tower, the bodyguards killed him, convincing evidence that no natural affection is proof against slander, and that none of our better feelings are strong enough to hold out against envy indefinitely. Yeah, this is very like I mean like Caesar stabbed to death in a hallway and just this kind of thing. It's always this kind of thing. Anyway, the incident had another surprising feature. Judas was an Essene born and bred, who had never been wrong or mistaken in any of his predictions. On this occasion, when he saw Antigonus passing through the temple, he called out to his acquaintances. A number of his pupils were sitting there with him. "O God, the best thing now is that I should die. Since truth is dead already, and one of my predictions has proved false, there, alive, is Antigonus, who was to have been killed today." The place where he was fated to die was Strato's Tower, and that is 70 miles away, and it is already 10 o'clock. The time has made nonsense of my prophecy. Having said this, the old man remained lost in gloomy thoughts, and a few minutes later came the news that Antigonus had been murdered in the underground strong point, which was actually called Strato's Tower. Like the coastal town of Caesarea, so the prophet's mistake was natural. Interesting. One of those, it's one of those plays, it's a Nostradamus thing, right? Like Nostradamus, but then again, that is remote viewing, though, right? The most legitimate of remote viewers, what they know is that a junior remote viewer may not necessarily be that good at getting all the layers of context for the concept forming in their mind when they have found their target focus. So this is where, in remote viewing, you get an extraordinary amount of use from the epistemology of objectivism by Ayn Rand, which is all about this kind of thinking, the full spectrum perspective, right? So now you're stopping and you're getting the look at the concept from the back, from the front, from its beginning, from its end, from its inside and its outside, right? And eventually you've completely triangulated, you've triple triangulated, and you've become absolutely diamond reinforced, right? This is when you come to that absolute truth because you have 50 indisputable citations, and you can read the riot act of them on cue. That is a weapon. That is the weapon that you use in the right argument at the right time, and it means nothing until then, because it can't fight any other fight. And thus is the war of words. Excuse me. Aristobulus, bitterly regretting this foul crime, at once fell into a swift decline. At the thought of the murder, his mind became unhinged, and he wasted away, until his entrails were ruptured by his uncontrollable grief, and he brought up quantities of blood. What? His entrails ruptured from grief? What? 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 What is torturing these people? What is this inner torture? Dear effing God. I thought I was going to be hearing a lot of stories about, arguments in the Senate that turned into, like, assassinations and stuff. We've got some of that. I mean, it's in here. I mean, we're just getting started with this, but this is still chapter 1. Right? And we got ruptured entrails already. It's just chapter 1. Woo! Good thing I listened to death metal. All right, while carrying this away, one of the servants waiting on him, impelled by divine providence, slipped at the very spot where Antigonus had been struck down. You know, I'm already getting an album. This book could be a concept album. One song about how each one of these motherfuckers died. Oh man, somebody's now stolen that idea because I had to speak it. But anyway. Anyways. Oh, okay, servants impaled by divine providence slipped at the very spot where Antigonus had been struck down, and on the blood stains still visible of the murdered man, he split the blood of the killer. At once a shriek went up from the spectators, as if the servant had poured the blood there on purpose. Hearing the cry, the king asked the reason, and when no one dared tell him, he insisted on being informed. At last, by threats, he compelled them to tell him the truth. His eyes filled with tears, and groaning with the little strength that was left, he murmured, "So it is. I could not hide my unlawful deeds from God's all-seeing eye. Swift retribution pursues me for the blood of my kinsmen. How long, most shameless body, will you contain the soul that has been adjudged my mother's and my brother's? How long shall I pour out my blood to them, drop by drop? Let them take it all at once. Let heaven mock them no more with these libations from the entrails." The next moment he was dead, having reigned no more than a year. His widow released his brothers and enthroned Alexander, the eldest, and seemingly the most balanced character. But on ascending the throne, he executed one brother as a rival claimant, the survivor who preferred to keep out of the public eye he held in honor. He also came into conflict with Ptolemy Lathyrus, who had seized the town of Asiochus. He inflicted many casualties, but Ptolemy had the advantage. But when Ptolemy was chased away by his mother Cleopatra and withdrew to Egypt, Alexander besieged and took Gadara and Amathus, the biggest stronghold east of Jordan, but were stored the most valuable possessions of Zeno's son Theodorus. But by a sudden counterattack, Theodorus not only recovered his property, but captured the king's baggage train, killing some 10,000 Jews. However, the blow, and good on him for not saying 6 million. Good on him. The blow was not fatal, and Alexander, turning towards the coast, captured Gaza, Raphia, and Anthedon. See, he could capture Gaza. It's not that hard. I'm kidding. Which King Herod later renamed Agrippius. After his enslavement of these towns, there was a Jewish rising at one of the feasts. The unusual occasion for sedition to flare up. It took as if he would be unable to crush this conspiracy, but his foreign troops came to the rescue. These were Pisidians and Cilicians. Interesting. I wonder if they took a lot of mushrooms. Silica? Silica's not mushrooms. Psilocybin is mushrooms. But it's got psilo in it, so I don't know if there might be an etymological relationship, but it's probably not related too much to this name. But these are the word games that matter on a level that most people can't appreciate. and especially when I see a proper name that hasn't been changed for my freaking language preference. Palestinians he did not recruit as mercenaries became of their innate detestations of all Jews. After putting to the sword over 6,000 of the insurgents, he attacked Arabia, overrunning Gilead and Moab and imposing tribute on the inhabitants. Then, returning to Amathus, he found that Theodorus had taken fright at his victories and abandoned the fortress, so he demolished it. He next took the field against Obadas of Arabia, but the king had laid an ambush near Gaulin, and Alexander fell into the trap, losing his entire army, which was crowded together at the bottom of a ravine and crushed by a mass of camels. This is a dark comedy. This is like a war movie. This is like a war comedy. Right? This is like the ultimate like war like what comedy of errors am I reading here? How like why are you fighting so hard at such a level of mass disorganization? like all of this over your ideals of that temple. He made good his own escape to Jerusalem, but the completeness of the disaster fanned the smoldering fires of hatred, and the nation rose in revolt. Their own dudes revolt against them. Okay, so you can't. So you're gonna call Jews anti-Semitic, right? Like it's a question. The question is, did Flavius Josephus, whichever way it goes around, I don't care really right now. Is he characterizing his nation, right? Is he representing his nation honorably, right? Like, is this the way it is? Like, at least the way it is as far as, like, what do we know now? Where do the Jews stand on the history now, right? And that's going to be a tough one because I'm reading this book because I've heard it time and time again of how very important to the story here this is, because it's part of certain people's worlds, that this is a big part of history to understand how basically Christian Rome happens. Okay, so he fell into the trap, complete list of disaster. No, hold on. Okay, where was I? Abandoned the fortress, so he demolished it. He next took the field. Going Alexander fell for the trap. Entire army for a crowded bottom of Rick. Yeah, that's right. Mass of camels. Anyway, he made good. I can't believe how long that mass of camels fucking rant had me going. He made good his own escape to Jerusalem, but the completeness of the disaster fanned the smoldering fires of hatred, and the nation rose in revolt. Oh yeah, and I also read that. Only to be worsted again in a succession of battles, which lasted 6 years and cost the lives of as many as 50,000 Jews. He had little cause to rejoice over these victories, so ruinous to his kingdom, so suspending warlike operations, he attempted to reach an understanding with his subjects by persuasion. But they were still more embittered by his change of front and unstable behavior, and when he asked in what way he could satisfy them, they replied, by dying. Even a dead man would be hard to forgive for such monstrous crimes. Without more ado, they called on the Demetrius the Ready for help. Okay, that's like some weird typo. Because I'm not over any edges. Everything reads fine up to... Okay. So Demetrius the Ready for help, he at once agreed in the hope of enlarging his kingdom and arrived with an army joining his Jewish allies near Sichem. The combined army was opposed by Alexander with 1,000 cavalry and an infantry force of 8,000 mercenaries, reinforced by local Jews to the number of 10,000. The other side consisted of 3,000 cavalry and 14,000 infantry. Before battle was joined, the two kings issued proclamations intended to detach supporters from the other side. Demetrius hoping to win over Alexander's mercenaries, Alexander, Demetrius's Jewish contingent, as the Jews would not abandon their bitterness or the Greeks their loyalty. There was nothing for it but an appeal to force. Victor in the battle was Demetrius, in spite of a magnificent display of determination and prowess by Alexander's mercenaries. The outcome of the engagement, however, was not at all what either side had expected. Demetrius the victor was deserted by those who had called him in, whereas through sympathy for the man who was down, Alexander, after fleeing to the hills, was joined by 6,000 Jews. This swing of the pendulum was too much for Demetrius, convinced that Alexander was now fit to take the field again and that the whole nation was flocking to his standard. He withdrew. The departure of their allies did not cause the rest of the people to lay aside their quarrel. They waged war unremittingly with Alexander till after very heavy losses, the remnants were driven into Messalius. When this town fell, the survivors were taken as prisoners to Jerusalem. So unbridled was Alexander's rage that from brutality he proceeded to impiety. 800 of the prisoners he impaled in the middle of the city, then butchered their wives and children before their eyes. Meanwhile, cup in hand, as he reclined amidst his concubines, he enjoyed the spectacle. Such terror gripped the people that the next night 8,000 of the king's opponents fled right out of Judea and remained in exile till his death. By such deeds he at last gave his kingdom an uneasy peace and hung up his weapons. Let me take a look here. Yeah, all right. I'm just gauging how long this chapter is. Okay, there's the bottom of the chapter. All right, I'm gonna take another break. I think nowish. I'm not sure how long I've been going, but I feel the need to give her a rest. So I am going to I'm gonna pick something. What's good? What do I want to give y'all? Yeah, alright, that's fine. Alright, I'm feeling vicious. I'm feeling really vicious. So I'm gonna give you vicious. What am I doing? One second. I'm not getting all the songs I wanted to pick. Alright, fine.
With Geico, we can...
I don't want Geico. Alright, Alright, here we go. We're going vitriol. nursing from the motherland. Yeah. 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 Love me some Kalrazamoozin. Vitriol. Anyway, let's jump back into the horror show. This is I'm having a really good time reading this. um but man, I got to get back on page, don't I? Fuck. Shit. All right. So I got to jump back up a little bit. Yeah, hung up his weapons. Ah, good, I found it. Ah, sometimes that takes forever. But fresh troubles were in store for him. The work of Antiochus Dionysius. I find it hysterical how that's almost Dionysus. And these are all Greek Jews, I believe, right? You know? So it's like you got to get used to hearing Jewish names of Jews that are Greek, right? So, brother of Demetrius and last heir of Seleucus, this man launched a campaign against the Arabs, alarming Alexander, who dug a deep trench stretching from the hillside above Antipartus to the beach at Joppa, raising a high wall in front of the trench with wooden towers built into it to ward off attacks at the weak points. But Antiochus was not to be stopped. He burnt the towers, filled in the trench, and marched his army across, deciding to deal later with the man who had tried to stop him. He went straight on to attack the Arabs. The king retired to better defensive positions, then suddenly faced about with his cavalry force of 10,000 men and fell upon the army of Antiochus. While in disarray, a bitter struggle followed. While Antiochus survived, his men fought on, though they suffered appallingly at Arabs' hands. Like, it's amazing how he's kind of going through all of this shit, and none of these stories, like why? It's all like, why are they, like, it's like, just think about think about what this book is not saying. What the hell is bringing these people to this point in this situation going on, right? This is ridiculously cutthroat. This is I mean, like, it's not like they got the best view of the fucking afterlife, and they're all pretty good at getting themselves there. I mean, God. When at last he fell as a result of risking his life all the time in the forefront to help his struggling soldiers, the entire line broke. Most of his army was destroyed in the engagement or in the subsequent flight. The survivors took refuge in the village of Cana, where lack of food killed off all but a handful. At this point, the people of Damascus, through the hatred of Ptolemy, son of Manius, brought in Aretas and made him king of Coel, Syria. He promptly marched into Judea. Those annotations for when it said one up there was or crucified, so there's a discrepancy in what happened. And then 2 was actually last, but 1. And that's 1 with an O, like the number 1. So, or crucify. Let me go back up to 1, because I want to remind myself of what context we had here. Heir of Seleucus, so that's where the 2 is. And or impaled. Okay, 800 prisoners he impaled or crucified. Okay, got it. Yep, that makes sense. Okay. So he marched into Judea, defeated Alexander in battle, agreed on terms, and withdrew. Alexander took Pele and advanced against Gerasa. Once more coveting Theodorus's possessions. After shutting up the garrison within a temple wall, he occupied the place without a battle. He went on to overwhelm Gaulane and Seleucia and the valley of Antiochus and captured the strong fortress of Gamala, dismissing its commander Demetrius, who was accused of many crimes. Then he returned to Judea after 3 whole years in the field and was warmly welcomed by the nation in view of his successes. But the end of the war proved to be the beginning of physical decay. Afflicted with a quartan egg, or ague, I can't quite make that word out, agu, he thought he could get rid of his sickness by resuming a strenuous life. He threw himself into ill-judged campaigns, and by making impossible demands on his body's strength, wore himself out completely. He died in the midst of storm and stress after reigning 27 years. 27 years could be a decent reign if you weren't the youngest dude going into it. I don't know. I don't have the full context of age here, right? But I'm sure it was short, and he gave himself. Yeah, he. It's just like, I know, I'll work myself to death. That'll fix it. That's what he did. It just, you can see, I know people that are like this though, right? Like, and they're just doing a day job. There's nothing important that it's like he's the king, right? But anyway, so he had left his throne to his wife Alexandra, confident that the Jews would most readily submit to her, since by her freedom from any trace of his brutality and her constant opposition to his excesses, she had gained the goodwill of the people, and he was right in his expectations. Woman though she was, she established her authority by her reputation for piety. She was most particular in her observance of the national customs, and offenders against the holy laws she turned out, she turned out of office. Of the 2 sons she had borne Alexander, she appointed, page jumped a little bit, there we are. She appointed the elder, Hyrcanus high priest, in view of his age and his natural disinclination to interfere with state affairs. The younger, Aristobulus, who was an impulsive character, she kept out of the public eye. Interesting. You know what this made me just think of? Momcore, Futurama. Mom's got the 3 fucking sons. One of them's an absolute imbecile. I think this might be where he got it from. This is like the tongue-in-cheek, on-point Jew jokes in any of Matt Groening's work is pretty good shit, right? This is fucking Futurama, right? And you got to understand Michael Tsarion's the female Illuminati, Dragon Mother, and things of this nature. You've got to understand real matriarchal complexes, right? So this is why people are like, what's this all about? Like the question I just asked earlier, this is why. It's because they're not talking about what their women are talking about. No. Their women are having a whole private conversation. And they're probably the ones making the men kill each other. Because that's what people are fucking fighting for. If you're some fucking cuck, you will fight for pussy. You will fucking risk your limbs to get your dick wet. It's fucking sad. And everybody does it. Everybody fucking does it. Jews ain't fucking special. There, I said it. Anyway, alongside her was the growing power of the Pharisees, a Jewish sect that appeared more pious than the rest and stricter in the interpretation of the law. Alexandra, being devoted to religion, paid too great heed to them, and they, availing themselves more and more of the simplicity of the woman, ended by becoming the effective rulers of the state, free to banish or recall, to release or imprison, at will. In short, the privileges of royal authority were theirs. The expenses and vexations Alexandra's she was very shrewd in making major decisions, and by regular recruiting doubled the size of her army, collecting also a large mercenary force, so that besides making her own country strong, she inspired a healthy respect in foreign potentates. But while she ruled others, the Pharisees ruled her. Thus Diogenes, an eminent man who had been a friend of Alexander, was put to death by them on the charge of having abetted the king in his impaling of 800 citizens. Then they pressed Alexandra to execute the rest of those who had incited Alexander against them. What would 800 people want to do something so noteworthy, right? We're talking about like crime, like this was an uprising, like an 800 uprising, and that's the understanding of it all, right? Like, what are the uprising about, right? You know, just like, were they starving them? Were they getting really, really irate about the way they were walking or something? like was it attacking their personal preferences in life, right? Because people get really irate when you tell them they can't be themselves, right? So we had maximum don't be yourself in 2020, and then everybody used the Summer of Floyd as an excuse to be themselves again, even though their figure had been completely distorted by all of the hypocrisy. Okay, her superstitious nature made her give way, and they killed whom they would. Yeah, you see, superstitious, she was paranoid. She'd probably be thinking God's telling her the devil's here, or she's convinced that Shaitan is tormenting her, and it's this guy's fault. You've got batshit crazy women. This is the batshit crazy women situation. And I don't know how exactly that all works, because I don't spend too much time worrying about it, because I don't have a problem with the quote Jews. And they're probably only some of them are like this. You know, maybe it's only people like that. Because this does, obviously, if this doesn't happen in America, right, it's not like a Jewish thing, right? But I think we're still seeing shit like this happening in the Middle East. So And I think that if you're of a class stratum living in the Middle East, you have favorable choices in being part of dissident groups because you aren't picking a place to belong because you want to feel loved, although that's part of it. But you are finding a place to belong because resources are limited, and so you have to do the Islamo-socialist thing to survive. You have to benefit from socialism because of the depravity of resources when you live in a place of infertile soil. Right? There's not a lot of great ground in a lot of these places. They're not getting enough water. Everybody understands that, right? It's part of the crazy circumstances. Maybe these guys are just, maybe they got heat mat. Maybe they've just been suffering Apollo for too long, and he's just making them fucking sick, right? Keeping the temperature up is not helping, right? I mean, like, if we were back in the paradise time, there wouldn't be a desert there. It would just be lush forest all over the friggin' place. Lush forest. Anyway, the most prominent of the threatened citizens sought the aid of Aristobulus, and he persuaded his mother to spare them in view of their station, expelling them from the city if not sure of their innocence. Thus granted impunity, they scattered over the country. Alexandra dispatched an army to Damascus on the ground that Ptolemy was regularly meddling there. But the army returned with no particular success to its credit. However, while Tigranes, the Armenian king, was encamped before Ptolemaeus' besieging Cleopatra, she won him over by bargaining and bribery. But he had to withdraw in hot haste to deal with troubles at home. Lucullus, having invaded Armenia, meanwhile Alexandra sickened the younger son. Aristobulus seized his chance, and with his numerous servants, all devoted to him because of his impulsive character, got all the strongholds into his power, and with the money found there raised a force of mercenaries and proclaimed himself king. Right, so, here he is, he's got like a little nomadic nation. He's built his own little fighting nomadic nation force that, is going to be capable of taking over territories and holding them and possibly growing the ranks, right? Because if you're going to bother to make this move, you're going to want to have the aspirations. So this so upset Hyrcanus that his mother felt very sorry for him and locked up the wife and children of Aristobulus in Antonia. This was a fortress adjoining the temple on the north side, as stated already. It was first called Beris and later renamed when Antony was supreme, just as the cities of Sebaste and Agrippius were named after Sebastos Augustus and Agrippa. But before Alexandra could proceed against Aristobulus for the unseating of his brother, she died after ruling the country 9 years. The heir to the throne was Hyrcanus. While still alive, Alexandra had put the kingdom in his hands, but in ability and enterprise he was no match for Aristobulus. Near Jericho, the two met in battle for the crown, but the bulk of Hyrcanus' army deserted him and went over to Aristobulus. Hyrcanus, with those who stuck to him, immediately sought shelter in Antonia and seized as hostages for his security the wife and children of Aristobulus. However, final disaster was averted by a compromise. Aristobulus was to be king, and Hyrcanus, having abdicated, was to retain his other dignities as the king's brother. On these terms, they were reconciled in the temple, and surrounded by the people, they warmly embraced each other and exchanged residences. Aristobulus taking over the palace, Hyrcanus Aristobulus' house. This is like watching like a very bad football game where they're going back and forth in petty manners and causing so much damage over these power plays, over issues going on in the backdrop that are not made entirely clear in this book. Yet. If. Don't even know. Because this is all happening in real time. I have no idea what it's going to say next. Okay, Fear seized the enemies of Aristobulus when he so unexpectedly triumphed, most of all Antipater, whom he had long detested. He was by race an Idumean, and ancestry, wealth, and other sources of strength made him the natural leader of his nation. He advised Hyrcanus to seek the protection of Aretas, king of Arabia, and so win back his kingdom. Right, go out and seek protection, like this proxy war shit. This is all proxy war shit. At the same time, arguing Aretas to receive... Well, granted, this has always been, like... This is also kind of typical. Like, we say proxy war like it really means something special. But it doesn't. It's just business as fucking usual. Anyway, we just have our reasons why we favor who we favor, right? Urging Aretas to receive Hyrcanus and restore him to his throne. He heaped abuse on the character of Aristobulus and lavished praise on Hyrcanus, and argued that it was the right thing for the ruler of so splendid a kingdom to extend his aid to the wronged. Wronged indeed was Hyrcanus, deprived as he was of the crown that was his by right of birth. Having prevailed on both men, he slipped out of the city in the dark with Hyrcanus, and making all speed arrived safely at Petra, the capital of Arabia. There he handed over Hyrcanus to Aretas, whom, by dint of much persuasion and carefully chosen presents, he induced to provide an army to restore the exiled 50,000 horse and foot. For such a force, Aristobulus was no match. Worsened in the first clash, he was chased into Jerusalem, where he would quickly have been captured after successful assault had not Scaurus, the Roman commander, intervened in the nick of time and ended the siege. So Big Brother had to effing show up and save his ass. Ridiculous, right? So, Scaurus had been sent into Syria from Armenia by Pompeius Magnus, who was at war with Tigranes, arriving at Damascus immediately after its capture by Metellus and Lullius. He packed off these officers and, learning how things were in Judea, lost no time in seizing this heaven-sent opportunity. As soon as he set foot on Jewish soil, delegates arrived from both brothers to request his aid. The rights of the case were outweighed by Aristobulus, a gift of 300 talents. Accepting this sum, Scotus sent a herald to Hyrcanus and the Arabs, threatening them with Pompey and the Romans unless they raised the siege. Back from Judea to Philadelphia fled Anytus in a panic, and back to Damascus went Scaurus. Aristobulus was not satisfied with his escape, but collected his entire army and pursued the enemy. Near Papyron, he engaged them and killed over 6,000, among whom was Antipater's brother Phalion. Oy. Hyrcanus and Antipater, deprived of Arab help, transferred their hopes to the other side, and when Pompey entered Syria and arrived at Damascus, they sought his protection. They brought no presents, but relied on the same arguments as they had used with Anytus, begging him to repudiate the violent methods of Aristobulus and to restore to his throne the man to whom, as the elder and better of the two. And the annotation from earlier, as usual, this incredible figure undergoes further expansion in antiquities. All right. Oops. So, and better of the two, it belonged. Nor was Aristobulus behindhand, knowing the Scaurus could be bribed. He too presented himself decked out in all his royal splendor, but he turned sick of servility and could not bear to abase himself in order to secure his ends at the cost of his dignity. So, at Diospolis, he turned back. All right, real quick. 2 pages, 3 pages, 4, 5. All right, it's quite a ways. Right? Yeah, quite a ways. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit further, and then I'm gonna take a break. This conduct stung Pompey, who, yielding to the importunity of Hyrcanus and his friends, set off in pursuit of Aristobulus at the head of the Roman army and numerous auxiliaries from Syria. See, so look at all this trouble. Like the Roman army's after this guy, the Syrians are after this guy. It's just like this is like, what kind of trouble? Like, what is all this trouble about? Like, why? Why is this worth fighting for, dying for, running from? Has life gotta be that awful? Like, what was the world that this guy wanted to have that people are just like, dude, we don't want your shit, you know? Because I'm assuming it's got to be that, unless it's just he was bad at his job, right? You know, like as far as crunching the numbers, the immediate needs of the nation. At any rate, bypassing Pella and Scythopolis, he came to Kore, where travelers from the interior crossed into Judea, informed that Aristobulus had sought safety in Alexandrium, a most elaborately equipped fortress perched on a lofty eminence. He sent orders to him to come down. Summoned thus pretemporally, the king was more inclined to try a fall than to submit, but he saw that the people were frightened to death, and his friends begged him to realize that Roman power was irresistible. Taking their advice, he came down to Pompey, attempted at great length to justify his claim to the throne, and went back to his stronghold. At his brother's invitation, he came down again, argued the rights and wrongs of the case, and went away without hindrance from Pompey. Hovering between hope and fear, he came down repeatedly in the expectation of talking Pompey into putting everything into his hands, and as often returned to his citadel to avoid the appearance of yielding too soon. Finally, however, Pompey insisted on his evacuating the forts, and as the commanders had instructions to take no notice of any order not written by Aristobulus himself, he forced him to send each of them a written order to march out. Aristobulus complied, but withdrew to Jerusalem in a rage and prepared for war with Pompey. Pompey allowed him no time for these preparations, but followed at once, stimulated by news of Mithridates. Mithridates, I kind of like. It would probably be Mithridates because I've heard dates as the at the end of Greek words. Then Mithra would make sense because there would probably be some Mithraism going on in the world at this time. By news of Mithridates' death received when he was near Jericho. This is the most fertile spot in Judea, rich in palms and in balsam. The stems of the balsam trees are slashed with the sharp stones, and the resin collected where it is exuded from the cuts. After spending one night in camp there at dawn, he set off rapidly for Jerusalem. Panicking at his approach, Aristobulus met him as a suppliant, and by promising money and putting the city and himself in his hands, appeasing his anger. But no part of this agreement was carried out. The officer sent to receive the money, Gabinius, was prevented by Aristobulus' partisans from even entering the city. Okay, so stung once more. I'm going to take a break here and then come back to it. All right, so now what nonsense do I want to play? What's going to work? What's going to work? No, too long. Fine. All right. Yeah, sure. All right, I'm going to play some Flesh God Apocalypse. Blood Clock. Yeah. All right, we're back. Thank you. What's going on? All right. Let's have back at it. There's six pages left. All right. Okay, the bottom of the screen is getting cut off. I'm seeing here. There we go. All right. Stung once more by his treatment, Pompey kept Aristobulus in custody and, advancing to the city, reconnoitered the possible lines of attack. Observing the almost impregnable strength of the walls, the formidable ravine in front of them, and within the ravine the temple, with its fortifications so strong that if the town was captured it would provide a further refuge for the enemy. While Pompey took time to make up his mind, party strife broke out in the city. Supporters of Aristobulus calling for war and the rescue of the king, those of Hyrcanus urging the opening of the gates to Pompey. Numbers of the latter were swelled by fear when they saw the perfect discipline of the Romans. Worsted in the struggle, the opposite faction retired into the temple, destroying the bridge linking temple and city, and prepared to fight to the death. The others invited the Romans into the city and surrendered the palace, to which Pompey sent Piso, one of his senior officers, and a large body of men. Piso posted sentry groups about the city, and as none of the men sheltering in the temple could be persuaded to come to terms, he removed all obstacles in the vicinity in readiness for an assault, finding the supporters of Hyrcanus most free with advice and assistance. It's fascinating watching this. It's kind of, well, it's a very third world country behavior, isn't it? Right? To have this level of instability, right? And we're used to kind of seeing this nonsense, like the way fucking like people are cutthroat in the Baltic states, man. That kind of cutthroat parliamentary. It must be Tuesday because somebody threw a chair at the prime minister, right? Right? That kind of fucking atmosphere. That's about 2 degrees removed from this particular passage, if you ask me, right? It's not that fucking far off, right? This is, if we're going to bother to say certain civilizations maybe don't matter, because I've heard a lot of people say my civilization doesn't matter. Then you tell me, why does this civilization matter? Explain it to me, right? But I don't hear the women talking. Granted, the women weren't talking back then, right? Like, none of the women were talking. But it's like, if this is going on, I promise you this is indicative of where the women's minds have been made up about things. Right? And if you've got a bitch in charge and shit just ain't fucking right, she's gonna fucking order shit until she likes the world again and feels that it is acceptable that she can stop throwing a fit. This is the kind of thing that people worry about. People do not understand the shadow power that various queens of England have wielded. Victoria, as such. And we can talk all day about the Lizzies. Who are related to these people, by the way. All right. Where was I? Was I still down at the bottom of the page? No. I should have read the thing. There we go. Once more treatment kept Josephus in custody. That's right, I read all that. Free advice and assistance. Right? Wasn't I there? Sentinel of the city preparing to fight to the death. The others invited the Romans to the city to surrender the palace. Pompey sent Piso. That's right. All right, I'm just going to read this passage. If I've missed something, my apologies. Pompey himself on the north side was busy filling in the trench in the entire ravine with material collected by the troops. This was a formidable task, as the depth was immense, and the Jews interfered from above in every possible way. The Romans would never have reached the end of their labors if Pompey had not availed himself of the seventh day, on which, for religious reasons, the Jews will not set their hands to any work, raising the level of his earthworks while keeping his men out of all armed clashes. For only in self-defense will Jews fight on the Sabbath. When at last the ravine was filled in, he erected high towers on his artificial platform, brought up the engines he had fetched from Tyre. What is an engine? An engine? Okay. This is obviously a poor choice of words. So let me look up. Okay. Use fucking Google. All right. What is an engine in, let's see, in Roman Empire times? Okay. Typically referred to a siege engine, a military machine used to break down fortifications or launch projectiles during sieges. These include devices like... Oh, okay, got it. All right, so an engine is just a short form for what you call a siege tower like this. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that makes sense. And it came from Tyre. Tyre's an interesting city, important historical city. Anyway, and began to batter the walls while the stone throwers prevented any interference from above. But for a long time, little impression was made on the towers, which in this sector were massive and splendid to a degree. While the Romans were suffering severely, Pompey was amazed at the unshakable endurance of the Jews, especially their maintenance of all the religious ceremonies in the midst of a storm of missiles. Just as if deep peace enfolded the city, the daily sacrifices, offerings for the dead, and every other act of worship were meticulously carried out to the glory of God. Not even when the temple was being captured and they were being butchered round the altar did they abandon the ceremonies. That's crazy, right? So like that's like the situation. Like this is like they're on an automatic religious programming, right? This is their cult, right? And so that's pretty crazy that you fight so hard for that, but you will not fight when you must, kneel before God and all those things, right? So it's also an acceptance of fate. So it's like if you have to do it at that time, then that is your time to die as God foresaw it as you are kneeling, and because there's stuff in there about consequences in their religion, and so like that it all, they have a thing for everything. So like their rational mind knows it's not like that kneeling is going to protect them personally, but it's not about them. It's about the whole thing. In fact, what they're fighting for is their ability to hold that up, right? They're keeping that rhythm alive. That's like a whole like thing. It's kind of similar to what used like if you ever watched the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Dr. Parnassus was one of these monks in a cave in the mystical East, and he and his brethren were chanting the words of creation or something consistently for a bazillion years, because if they were ever to stop, reality would implode or some nonsense like that. And then Mr. Nick, who is like a Satan character, comes in, and he goes and he if he infiltrates it. It's like his first time ever doing it or something, and he freaking has a moment where he makes everybody shut up. He makes their mouths disappear, and just like that, creation kept going. And so he says, see, Parnassus, I told you. You're wasting your time here, right? And he was just like, no, of course not. That just means that somewhere out there in the world, someone else, not just here, is also speaking creation. And that's what gets him out of there. He's going off into the world and finding these people that are doing that, while also, using his Imaginarium to kind of like trigger a life change in people, right? It's a transcendental experience attraction that's meant to basically have you like come into your life purpose and that kind of thing. And it uses psychic powers. It's a fucking amazing movie, Terry Gilliam film. Anyway, missed a storm of missiles, the temple being captured, they being butchered around the altar. Ordained for the day, in the third month of the siege, the Romans at last overthrew one of the towers and swarmed into the temple. The first who ventured to surmount the wall was Sulla's son, Cornelius Faustus. Next came two centurions, Furius and Fabius. They were furious and fabulous? that's they get a whole episode. Like this is like a really bad soap opera. Like they get to have a whole episode just about Furious and Fabius. That is hysterical to me. Anyway, followed by their respective units, which completely surround the temple court and killed some as they fled to the sanctuary, others as they put up a short-lived resistance. Many of the priests, though they saw the enemy approaching, sword in hand, quietly went on with the sacred rites and were cut down as they poured libations and offered incense, putting the service of God before their own preservation. Most who fell were killed by their own countrymen of the rival faction. Others, beyond number, threw themselves over the or the precipice. Some, maddened by their hopeless position, fired the buildings round the wall and perished in the flames. The Jews lost 12,000 dead. Of the Romans, very few were killed, but a good many wounded. So Wow, so 12,000 dead. The Romans had, like, very few, like, maybe 3, I suppose, or something like that. Like, a number not even statistically valuable. Like, that's how few people died on the Roman side of it. Like, this was, like, overall, like, this is like the easiest job. They had, like, the easiest job. Like, they had to freaking lay waste, like, this is your atypical Rome, yeah, fuck yeah, it's America. It's that. They got to have that moment just because these guys exist, right? This seems to be stuff that goes on in pretty hard parts of the Middle East right now. People talk real straight about tribal, right? And I think you're talking about, like, it's kind of the same thing as gang shit. The only difference between a gang and one of these tribal warlord situations is that it's just an urban environment that still has an infrastructure and it has to work under, because they don't have control, but they have control when the boss ain't looking, right? It's that situation. We all understand that. Among the disasters of that time, nothing sent such a shudder through the nations as the exposure by aliens of the holy place, hitherto screened from all eyes. Pompey and his staff went into the sanctuary, which no one was permitted to enter but the high priest. Right? This is their world completely fucking shattering, right? This is like, you got the rabble just like, oh, they went to the Holy of Holies. It's one of those situations. It's their fucking Armageddon, right? Their Dasein has now collapsed, right? Because God has forsaken them, right? And saw what it contained: the lampstand and the lamps, the table, the libation cups and censers, all of solid gold, and a great heap of spices and sacred money totaling 2,000 talents. Neither on this nor on any other of the sacred treasures did he lay a finger, and only one day after the capture he instructed the custodians to purify the temple and perform the normal sacrifices. He appointed Hyrcanus high priest again, because he had shown himself most helpful during the siege, especially by holding off the crowds of country folk anxious to fight for the Aristobulus. In such ways, he proved his worth as a general, and by relying on considerateness rather than severity, won the goodwill of the citizens. The prisoners included Aristobulus' father-in-law, who was also his uncle. The chief authors of the war were beheaded. Faustus and the men who had given him such splendid support receiving magnificent rewards. The country and its capital were laid under tribute. Well, good for him. Pompey next deprived the Jews of the towns they had occupied in Coelesyria, putting them under a Roman governor specially appointed. This meant that the nation was confined within its own boundaries. He rebuilt Gadara, which the Jews had razed to the ground. As a favor to a Gadarene among his own freed men, he also freed from their rule all such inland towns as they had not already destroyed: Hippus, Scythopolis, Pella, Samaria, Jamnia, Marissa, Azotus, and Erethusa. Likewise, the coastal towns, Gaza, Joppa, Dora, and the city were which at first was called Stratos Tower. Ooh. Okay, there we go. I gotta drink anyway. And later was rebuilt by King Herod on the most magnificent scale and renamed Caesarea. for the Caesar, I would suppose. All these towns he gave back to their legitimate citizens and added to the province of Syria, which with Judea and the whole area as far as Egypt and the Euphrates, he entrusted to Scaurus with 2 of his legions. He himself marched rapidly through Cilicia on his way to Rome, taking with him Aristobulus and his family as prisoners. Of the 2 sons and 2 daughters, one son, Alexander, escaped en route. The younger, Antigonus, and his sisters were conveyed to Rome. Meanwhile, Scaurus invaded Arabia, but was held up at Pella by the difficult terrain, and though he ravaged the country around, he suffered severely in doing so, as he ran completely out of food. From this plight he was saved by Hyrcanus, who sent supplies by Antipater. He, as an old friend of Aretas, was dispatched by Scaurus to persuade him to buy peace. The Arab agreed to pay 300 talents, and on those terms Scaurus removed his army from Arabia. The son of Aristobulus, who had slipped out of Pompey's hands, Alexander, in time, collected a large force with undermined Hyrcanus' position by overrunning Judea, and it looked as if he would quickly dethrone him. For he advanced to Jerusalem and brazenly began rebuilding the section of the wall thrown down by Pompey. But Gabinius had been sent to Syria as successor to Scaurus, and after showing his worth on many other occasions, he marched against Alexander. He, in alarm at his approach, recruited vigorously till he had 10,000 heavy infantry and 1,500 cavalry, and fortified carefully chosen positions, Alexandrium, Hyrcanium, and Macarchus, near the Arabian hills. Gabinius sent Mark Antony ahead with a detachment of his army and followed in person with the main body. Antipater and his picked men, with the other Jewish forces under Malichus and Paetholus, put themselves under the command of Mark Antony's officer and made contact with Alexander. Soon afterwards, the heavy infantry arrived with Gabinius at their head. The united forces of his enemies were too much for Alexander, who retreated until near Jerusalem. He was forced to give battle, losing in the engagement 6,000 men, of them killed, half of them prisoners. With the survivors, he fled to Alexandrium, where Gabinius, on his arrival, found many of them encamped. By promising to pardon their past offenses, he tried, before using force, to win them over. As they refused any compromise, he killed a large number and shut the rest into the stronghold. In this battle, Mark Antony displayed superlative courage. On every field he had invariably proved his worth, but never so convincingly as now. Gabinius left enough men to reduce the fort and went off himself to settle the towns that had not been sacked and to rebuild those that had been destroyed. On his instructions, Scythopolis, Samaria, Anthedon, Apollonia, Jamnia, Raphia, Marisa, Edorius, Gamala, Azotus, and many other towns were reestablished, each of them attracting an influx of eager colonists. These arrangements complete, he returned to Alexandrium and intensified the siege till Alexander, abandoning hope entirely, sent a herald to implore pardon for his offenses and to surrender his remaining forces of Hyrcanium and Machaerus. Finally, he handed over Alexandrium as well. All these Gabinius, at the instigation of Alexander's mother, demolished, that they might never be used as bases for a second war. The lady had come to ingratiate herself with him in her anxiety for the prisoners at Rome. Her husband and remaining children, Gabinius, next reinstated Hyrcanus in Jerusalem, entrusting him with the custody of the temple, and set up a political system based on aristocracy. He divided the whole nation into 5 unions, one centered around Jerusalem, one around Gadara, one under the protection of Amathus, the 4th assigned to Jericho, the 5th based on Sepphoris, a town in Galilee. So understand here, like these places, like the Middle East has been reforged. This area has been reforged over and over and over again. You know, you're not quite finding biblical history here, really. You're just not. You're not, you know, like not in the manner of direct artifacts that you don't even know truly what most of them did actually look like and were thought of at that time. It's like imagining you're going to find the actual cross that buried Christ. You know, you're not, right? It's like nobody said, like, that's the cross Jesus died on, I want it. No, nobody said that. Nobody said that. Somebody apparently wanted a Legionnaire's lance, allegedly. That's kind of weird. You know, somebody wanted his crown, I guess. Somebody wanted the cup. It's ridiculous, right? Pleased to be freed from the domination of one man, the Jews were thenceforth ruled by an aristocracy. All right. It was not long before trouble broke out for them. Aristobulus escaped from Rome and again rallied a number of Jews, some eager for political change, others long devoted to him. So why didn't they fucking, you should have just killed him. His first act was to seize Alexandrium and to attempt its refortification. But when he learnt that Gabinius had sent an army under Sisenna, well, I'm sure he's probably that important, right? It's just like if they kill him, you know, then those very men that rallied an army, it's always that, right? It's just he matters too much. He matters too much. People care about him in particular too much, right? So he's got that going for him. I don't know what level that's religious, other than a choice by his own deeds, or whether he is spinning some grift of being a chosen one. But he's got loyalists, you know, that can't be denied. Him being free, you know, it's like Napoleon. Napoleon's got loyalists. Thenceforth ruled by an aristocracy. So it was not long before trouble broke out for them. Rallied numbers. His first act was to seize Alexandrium, attempted a refortification. Had an army under. Learned that Gabinius had sent an army under Sisenna, Antony, and Servilius to attack him. He retired towards Machaerus, shaking off a mass of useless followers. He kept only those properly equipped. About 8,000 among these was Paetholus, chief of staff in Jerusalem, who had deserted to him with 1,000 men. The Romans followed close behind, and battle was joined. For a long time, Aristobulus and his men offered a fierce and successful resistance, but in the end they were overwhelmed by the Romans and lost 5,000 killed. Some 2,000 escaped on to a hill, and the remaining 1,000, led by Aristobulus, hacked their way through the Roman ranks and drove on to Machaerus. Well, that's kind of cool. That's kind of like a cool escape. Like they had to hack through the Romans, so they got like they were able to make a good escape. Good on them. So there there he bevouced. Hold on a minute. Okay, I'm sorry. So there as he bevouced the fight, bevouced the first night among the runs, the king dreamt of raising another army if only he was granted a breathing space, and he began to fortify the position after a fashion. But the Romans soon attacked, and after holding out for 2 days beyond his strength, he was captured, and with Antigonus, the son who had escaped with him from Rome, he was brought in fetters to Gabinius, and by Gabinius sent back to Rome. He himself was imprisoned by the Senate, but his children were allowed to return to Judea, as Gabinius sent a written statement that he had promised this to Aristobulus, Aristobulus' wife, in return for the surrender of the strongholds. So he wanted to fortify the position after a fashion. So fashion, by fashion, I know this context already, so I want to tell it to you because I know it, because it's related to where we get the word fashion for dress apparel, because it's also where we get the word for fascia, as in fascist, as in he was putting the army together. He was getting the men organized. That's what he means. He was getting the men soldiered. Right? He was putting the army into its organized ranks, getting people to sit in their file and be capable of taking orders and do the whole thing and have strategy together and yada yada yada. That's him fashioning his army. Yeah. So don't talk to me about fascism if you don't know that. Antifa, looking at you. Anyway. Gabinius had already sent off an expedition against the Parthians. When he was stopped by Ptolemy, he turned back from the Euphrates and restored that monarch to the Egyptian throne, supported throughout the campaign by all the resources of Hyrcanus and Antipater. Money, weapons, corn, and auxiliaries were furnished by Antipater, who also persuaded the Jewish frontier guards at the Pelusian approaches to let Gabinius pass. In the absence of Gabinius, there were risings all over Syria, and the Jews were again stirred to revolt by Alexander, Aristobulus' son, who collected a huge army and started a massacre of all the Romans in the country. Wow! What an incredible act of Loxism. It's nothing new, folks. These motherfuckers, they think they're better than you. This alarmed Gabinius, who had already hurried back from Egypt on hearing of the upheaval in Palestine. He had sent Antipater ahead to win over the rebels and met with some success. But 30,000 remained loyal to Alexander, and he was determined to fight. So, when Gabinius took the field, the Jews met him, and in a battle near Mount Tabor, lost 10,000, killed the rest, fleeing in all directions. Gabinius visited Jerusalem, where he reconstituted the government according to Antipater's wish. Setting out from there, he defeated the Nabateans in battle, the Mithridates and the Orsanes, refugees from Parthia, got away with his connivance, giving him the slip as he informed the soldiers. At this point, Crassus arrived to take over the governorship of Syria for the campaign against the Parthians. He removed all the gold from the sanctuary in Jerusalem, including the 2,000 talents Pompey had not touched. He crossed the Euphrates and perished with his army. But that is irrelevant to our story. After their victory, the Parthians swept forward to cross the river into Syria, but were driven back by Cassius, who had escaped to the Roman province. Having secured the province, he hurried towards Judea, capturing Tarichaesae, where he enslaved some 30,000 Jews, and at Antipater's suggestion executed Pitholus, who was trying to rally Aristobulus' partisans. Antipater had married a distinguished lady from Arabia called Cyprus, who bore him 4 sons: Phasael, the future King Herod, Joseph, and Pheroras, and as daughter Salome. He had won influential support on every side by kindness and hospitality. Above all, he had, by his marriage, made the Arab king his friend, and when he undertook the war against Aristobulus, it was to him that he sent his children for safekeeping. Like, at this point, like, wouldn't Aristobulus be kind of like an Osama bin Laden at this point? It's just put him down. Just put him fucking down. But anyway, Cassius, after forcing Alexander to give a written undertaking to keep the peace, went back to Euphrates to prevent a Parthian crossing. A fuller account will be given in a later work. No such account has come down to us. He never wrote it. He never wrote it. He sneaky little. Never mind. Anyway, when Pompey and the Senate fled across the Adriatic, Caesar became master of Rome and the empire. He at once released Aristobulus from prison, but 2 legions at his disposal sent him post-haste to Syria, in the hope that he would easily bring over the province and the whole Judean area to his side. But malice frustrated both Aristobulus' enthusiasm and Caesar's hope. Poisoned by Pompey's adherents, for a long time the king was even denied burial in his native land, his body lying preserved in honey till Antony delivered it to the Jews to be buried in the royal sepulchres. Death came also to his son Alexander by the axe of Scipio in Antioch. Scipio, that's Scorpio. That's interesting, right? So I bet some astrological bullshit went down right there with the Scorpio situation. Anyway, by order of Pompey, after he had been tried for the damage he had done the Romans, his brother and sisters were taken under the wing of Ptolemy, son of Menneus, and ruler of Chalcis under Lebanon, who sent his son Philippion to fetch them from Ascalon. Philippion tore Antigonus and his sister away from Aristobulus' widow, and it's pronouncing these with the possessive S makes it so much fucking harder to land the plane. Aristobulus' widow, and after taking them to his father, fell in love with the younger and married her, only to be killed on her account by his father, who, after murdering his son, married Alexandra himself. This marriage made him take still greater care of her brother and sister. These are not good people. These are not good people. Oh my God, this is like definition of bad people. On Pompey's death, Antipater changed sides and courted Caesar. And when Mithridates of Pergamus, while leading an army to Egypt, was warned off the Pelusians' approaches and held up at Ascalon as a friend of the Arabians, he persuaded them to assist and arrive himself with 3,000 Jewish infantry. He further won the support of two influential Syrians, the Ptolemy resident in Lebanon and the Jamblichus, who easily induced the towns in their neighborhood to join the war, all doubt dispelled by the additional strength which Antipater had provided. Mithridates pushed on to Pelusium, and finding the way, laid siege to the town. In the assault, two chief honors went to Antipater. He broached the wall, I think he meant breached, in front of him, and was the first to dash into the town, followed by his men. Pelusium fell, but as Mithridates advanced, he was again held up by the Egyptian Jews, who occupied the district called after Onius. Egyptian Jews. There's a tell in there. But Antipater induced them not only not to oppose the army, but even to furnish supplies. Consequently, at Memphis, the people refrained from opposition and volunteered to serve under Mithridates. He now rounded the delta and met the rest of the Egyptians in battle at a place called Jews' Camp. Everything is Jew this and Jew that, right? And then you get in trouble if you just say Jews. As the fight raged, he, with the entire right wing, was in grave danger when he was rescued by Antipater, who, after routing his opponents on the left, where he was in command, made his way round by the river bank. He fell on Mithridates' pursuers, killed a great many, and pursued the survivors so far that he even took their camp. He lost only 80 of his own men, whereas Mithridates, in the rout, had lost about 800. Saved thus from imminent destruction, he bore wholeheartedly testimony before Caesar to Antipater's achievements. Thereupon, Caesar, by praise and promise, incited the veteran to face further hazards on his behalf. In all these he proved himself the most intrepid of fighters, and wounded again and again, he bore on almost every part of his body the marks of his valor. Later, when ordered he had been restored in Egypt and Caesar returned to Syria, he bestowed Roman citizenship on him and exempted him from taxation, and by other honors and marks of friendship made him an object lesson to all. For his sake also Caesar confirmed the high priesthood of Hyrcanus. Okay, we made it. Chapter 2 will be whenever I get back to this bad boy. Thank you, everybody who is tuning in. Most of you were just listening, and I appreciate all of you. This was wild. That is the wildest first chapter of any book I think I've ever fucking read. That is something else. And it's nonfiction. Inaccurate nonfiction, but nonfiction. If 6 million Jews died somewhere, they did it to them fucking selves. For fuck's sake. Why are we crying about? Anyway, thank you guys. I will catch you later.